Chapter 3. An attic above my press was full of discarded papers, stacks of old newspaper, files of dead correspondence and accounts, manuscripts, and, above all, 1,000 copies of a school magazine which I used to print and display as my masterpiece and which I froze in the attic when the school could not pay the printing charges.
I called up a old paper buyer who was crying for custom in the streets. I sent him up the rickety staircase to make a survey and tell me his offer. This was an old Muslim who carried a sack on his back and cried, "Old paper, empty bottles, tramping the streets all afternoon."
13. Careful, I told him, sending him up the stairs to estimate. There may be snakes and scorpions in that place. No human being has set foot there for years.
Later, when I heard his steps come down, I prepared myself for the haggling phase by stiffening my countenance and assuming a grave voice. He parted the curtain, entered my parlor, and stood respectfully pressing his back close to the wall and waiting to be asked. "Well, have you examined?" "Yes, sir, most of the paper is too old and is completely brown."
"Surely you did not expect me to buy the latest editions for your benefit, or did you expect me to buy white paper in reams and sell it to you by weight?" I said with heavy sarcasm, and it softened him sufficiently to say, "I didn't say so." And then he made his offer.
I ignored it completely as not being worth a man's notice. At this point, if he really found my attitude unacceptable, he should have gone away, but he stayed, and that was a good sign. I was looking through the proofs of a cinema program, and I suddenly went in to attend to some item of work inside the press.
When I came out nearly an hour later, he was still there, sitting on the doorstep. "Still here?" I cried, feigning astonishment.
"By all means rest here if you like, but don't expect me to waste any more time talking to you. I don't have to sell all that paper at all. I can keep it as I have kept it for years."
He fidgeted uneasily and said, "The paper is brown and cracks. Please have consideration for me, sir. I have to make 1 or 2 rupees every day in order to bring up my family off." He went into details of his domestic budget, how he had to find the money for his children's school books, food and medicine, and rent, by collecting junk from every house and selling it to dealers in junk for a small margin of profit, often borrowing money at the start of a day.
After hearing him out, I relented enough to mention a figure, at which he picked up his sack and pretended to go. Then I mitigated my demand, he raised his offer, and this market fluctuation went on till 3 o'clock. Sastry came at 3 with a frown on his face, understood in a moment what was going on, and muttered, "Sometimes it's better to throw away all old paper under a boiler to save firewood than sell it to these fellows.
They always try to cheat," this lending support to my position. Presently Vasu arrived in his jeep and opened his valise, mumbling, "Let me note something before I forget." He sat in the Queen Anne chair, took out a sheet of paper, and wrote something.
Both of us, the parties to the old paper transaction, watched him silently. A truck was passing down the road, raising a blanket of cloud. A couple of jutkas were rattling along on their wooden wheels. A couple of vagrants had stretched themselves upon the parapet of the fountain to enjoy a siesta.
A little boy was watching his lamb graze a sort of lawn that the municipality was struggling to cultivate on the fringe of the fountain. A crow sat on the jet of the fountain, hopefully looking for a drop of water, an ideal hour for a transaction in junk. Vasu stopped writing and asked, "What's going on?"
I turned to the old paper man and said, "You know who he is? I'll have to explain to him if I give away too cheap." Vasu raised his eyes from the paper, glared at the Moslem, and asked, "What are you supposed to be doing?"
"Have a care." The trader grew nervous and said, "My final offer, sir. It's getting late. If I get nothing here, I must at least find another place for my business today."
"All right, go," I said. "I'm not stopping you. 25 rupees, sir."
"If this gentleman approves," I said. Vasu seemed pleased at this involvement. He tapped the table and hummed and hawed.
The ragman appealed to him. "I'm a poor man. Don't squeeze me."
"If I invest it," Vasu suddenly got up, saying, "Let's have a look at your loot, anyway," and, led by the Moslem, passed beyond the curtain and clambered upstairs. I was surprised to see Vasu enter the spirit of the game so completely. Presently the Moslem came down with a pile of paper and took it to the front step.
He came up to me, holding 25 rupees in currency, his face beaming. "That master has agreed." He made 3 more trips upstairs and barricaded my entrance with old paper. He beckoned to a jutka passing and loaded all the bundles in it.
I asked, "Where is that man?" "He is up there." "What's he doing there?" "I don't know. He was trying to open the windows."
Presently Vasu called me. "Nataraj, come up." "Why?" I cried.
I was busy with the cinema program. He repeated his command, and I went up. I had not gone upstairs for years.
The wooden stairs creaked and groaned, unused to the passage of feet. There was a small landing and a green door, and you stepped into the attic. Vasu was standing in the middle of it like a giant.
He had opened a little wooden window giving on a view of the fountain, over the market road. Beyond it was a small door opening on a very narrow terrace southward, which looked onto the neighboring roof tiles. The floor was littered with paper. Age-old dust covered everything.
Vasu was fanning around his ears with the cover page of the school magazine. "That man has done you a service in carrying away all that old paper, but he has dehoused 1,000 mosquitoes, one thing I can't stand." He was vigorously fanning them off as they tried to buzz about his cars.
Night or day, I run when mosquito is mentioned. "Let us go down," I said, flourishing my arms, unable to stand their attack around my head. "Wait a minute," he said.
"What do you propose to do with this place?" I ruminated for a moment. I had no plans for it, but before I could say so he said, "I'll clean it all up and stay here for a while. I like a place where I can throw my things and stay.
The important thing will be to get a mosquito net for sleeping in, a bed, and 1 or 2 chairs. The roof comes down too low," he said, looking up. He swung his arms up and down and said, "Still a couple of feet above my arms, not bad."
I gave him no reply. I had never viewed it as a habitable place. He asked, "Why are you silent?"
Nothing, I said. "I shall have to." "What?" he asked mercilessly.
"Don't tell me you want to consult your seniors or partners, the usual dodge. I will stay here till a bungalow is vacated for me in new extension. I couldn't dream of settling here."
"So don't be afraid. After all, you are going to put junk into it again." For a fortnight or more he'd been house hunting.
I gave him no reply and went down to my office. He followed me down, drove away in his jeep, returned an hour later with 4 workmen, carrying brooms and buckets. He led them past the curtain, up the stairs.
I heard him shouting and bullying them, and I heard the mops and brooms at work. He discovered the water closet below the staircase and made them carry buckets of water and scrub the floor. Next day he brought in a building worker and spent the whole day washing the walls of the attic with lime.
He passed in and out and hardly found the time for a word with me. I watched him come and go. 2 days later he brought a bedstead and a few odd pieces of furniture.
As I found it a nuisance to have Vasu and his minions pass up and down through the press, I opened a side gate in the compound, which admitted his jeep from Kabir Lane into a little yard and gave him direct access to the wooden stairs. It took me another week to realize that, without a word from me, Vasu had established himself in the attic. After all, I philosophized to myself, it's a junk room, likely to get filled again with rubbish.
Why not let him stay there until he finds a house? He disappeared for long periods. I had no idea where he went, and then suddenly dropped in. Sometimes he just came and lounged in my parlor.
My other visitors found it difficult to cope with his bullying talk. If the poet noticed his arrival, he slipped out. Sain, the journalist, had been unwittingly caught on the very first day, while he was expanding on Nehru's 5-year plan.
Vasu, who had just come in to collect some stationery, listened to his talk for a moment and, turning to me, asked, "Who's he? You have not told me his name." "A good friend," I said, and explained something about him.
Vasu shook his head patronizingly. "If he is so much wiser than Nehru, why don't he try and become the Prime Minister of India?" This brought forth a fitting reply from the journalist, who drew himself up haughtily and cried, "Who is this man?
Why does he interfere with me when I am talking to someone? Is there no freedom of speech?" Vasu said, "If you feel superior to Nehru, why don't you go to Delhi and take charge of the cabinet?" and laughed contemptuously. Words followed. The journalist got up in anger, and Vasu advanced threateningly. I came between them with a show of bravery, dreading lest someone should hit me. I cried, "All our friends here.
I won't allow a fight.
Not here, not here. Then where? Asked Vasu. I replied, nowhere.
I don't want to be insulted, that's all, said the bully. I am not going to be frightened by anyone's muscle or size. Do you threaten to hit me?
Sane cried. I was in a panic. He pushed me away and stepped up to Vasu.
No, sir, said Vasu, recoiling. Not unless I'm hit first. He raised his fist and flourished it.
I could settle many problems with this. But I don't. If I hit you with it, it will be the end of you. But it doesn't mean I may not kick.
Vasu often sat in my parlor and expanded on his philosophy of human conduct. Nataraj, he would suddenly say. Life is too short to have a word with everyone in this land of 300-odd millions.
One has to ignore most people. I knew it was just a fancy speech and nothing more, because his nature would not let him leave anyone in peace. He'd wilt if he could not find some poor man to bully all day.
There was no stopping him from interesting himself in others. If he found someone known to him, Lai taunted him. If he met a stranger, he bluntly demanded, who is he?
You have not told me his name. No Maharaja finding a ragged commoner wandering in the halls of his darbar would have adopted a more authoritative tone in asking, who is this? Vasu's habit of using my front room as an extension of his attic was irksome, as I had my own visitors, not to speak of the permanent pair, the poet and the journalist.
For a few days Sane and the poet cleared out the moment they heard the jeep arrive, but gradually their views underwent a change. When Vasu came in, Sane stuck to his seat with an air of defiance, as if saying, I'm not going to let a beefy fellow. The poet transferred himself without fuss from the high-backed Queen Anne chair to a poorer seat and developed the art of surviving Vasu's presence.
He maintained a great silence but, if forced to speak, he confined himself to monosyllables, at which he was an adept in any case. And I was glad to note that Vasu had a lot of things on his mind and had no time for more than a couple of nasty personal remarks, which the poet pretended not to hear. Sane suppressed the expression of his political opinions when Vasu was there, which was a good tiling again.
But it did not save him, as Vasu, the moment he remembered his presence, said, what are the views of our wise friend on this? To which Sane gave a fitting reply, such as, if people are dense enough not to know what is happening around, I'm not prepared to. Etc., etc.
This would act as a starting point for a battle of words, but it never came, as on the first day, to near blows, it just fizzled out. I left them all alone. If they wrangled and lost their heads and lost control of their voices, it was purely their business and not mine.
Even if heads got broken, I don't think I'd have interfered. I had resigned myself to anything. If I had wanted a peaceful existence, I should have rejected Vasu on the very first day.
Now it was like having a middle-aged man-eater in your office and home, with the same uncertainties and the same potentialities. This man-eater softened, sniveled and purred, and tried to be agreeable only in official presence. One day he brought in a khaki-clad, cadaverous man, a forestry official, seated him, and introduced me to him.
This is my best friend on earth, Mr. Nataraj. He and I are more like brothers than a printer and customer or landlord and tenant. Actually, I am not a landlord, don't want to be one, I said, remembering how much more at peace I used to be when my attic was tenanted by junk.
Woe unto the day I got the idea of cleaning it up. Vasu said, even among brothers, business should be business. True, true, said the forester.
Now Vasu turned to the art of flattery. I never could have guessed his potentialities in this direction. He declaimed, I have brought Mr.
Because I want you to know him. He is a very busy man, but he came here with me today. Do you stay in the forest?
Before the forester could speak, Vasu answered, he is Mempi Forest. He is everything there. He knows and has numbered every beast that's there, and he has no fear.
If he was a coward he'd not have been in this department, you know what I mean? The forester felt that it was time for him to put in a word about himself. I have put in 30 years in the department.
They gave me a third extension in my service only 2 weeks ago. See how he looks? Can you guess his age?
I wanted to say I could do it unerringly. He is like a teak tree. Thousands of those trees in Mempi range are in his charge, isn't it so, sir? Yes, that's a big responsibility, he said.
And he looks wiry, but he must be like a teak log in strength. I'm a strong man, as you know, but I'd hesitate to challenge him. Ha, ha, ha.
He stopped laughing and said, seriously, he is one of the best forest officers in India. How many times has he been charged by a rogue elephant? 18 times in my service, said the man statistically.
And you just gave it a 405 charge at point blank range? Yes, what else could one do? Said the hero. How many tigers has he tracked on foot?
An average of at least one every half year, he said. And in 30 years you may guess how much he must have seen and done, Vasu said, and asked the hero, what did you do with all those skins? Oh, gave them away here and there, said the man.
I don't fancy keeping these trophies. Ah, you shouldn't say so. You must let me stuff at least one animal for you, and you will know the difference, said Vasu. Nataraj, he said suddenly, the main reason why I have brought him to you is, he wants a small book to be printed.
My heart sank. It was terrible enough to have Vasu for a customer, and now to have to work for someone he was championing. The 3 color labels were still undelivered.
Nataraj, you will have to clear your desk and do this. I held out my hand mechanically. The forester took out of his bag a roll of manuscript, saying, I have made it a habit to collect golden thoughts, and I have arranged them alphabetically.
I wish to bring them out in book form and distribute them to school children, free of cost. That is how I want to serve our country, he said. I turned over the manuscript.
Virtues were listed alphabetically. My Tamil types are not good. My neighbor has the best Tamil types available, and his original Heidelberg, oh.
Vasu groaned. The original again? I looked at him compassionately. As a man of education, Vasu, I began, you should not shut your mind to new ideas.
But why on earth should I know anything about the original? What's its name? He cried with mild irritation. It was evident that he was struggling to be on his best behavior before the man in khaki. It's because, I replied with the patience of a saint explaining to an erring soul, it's the machine on which fast printing is done. For instance, the kind of work like our friends here, Golden Thoughts, the right place for it would be the original Heidelberg, lovely machine.
What do you say, sir? I said, turning to the man. Having spent a lifetime with would-be authors, I knew their vanities from A to Z.
The forester said, yes, I want the best service possible. The book should look very nice. I want to send a specially bound copy to our chief conservator at Delhi through our chief at Madras. So you want 2 special copies?
I asked. Yes, Lai agreed readily. I looked through the pages of the manuscript.
He had culled epigrammatic sentiments and moralizings from all sources, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Shakespeare, Mahatma Gandhi, Bible, Emerson, Lord Avebury, and Confucius, and had translated them into Tamil. It was meant to elevate young minds, no doubt, but I'd have felt a resentment if I had been told every hour of the day what I should do, say, or think. It'd be boring to be steadfastly good, night and day. I thought the book had in it most of the sentiments that Vasu had missed in life and that it might do him good to pick up a few for his own use.
I told him, I'm sure you will enjoy going over this manuscript, in case our friend does not find the time to give it a final look over. Oh, yes, of course, Vasu said faintly. I was confident now that I could dodge, at least for the time being, the responsibility of printing the golden book, but I couldn't judge how long.
If I took it on, with Vasu literally living overhead, he'd storm the press night and day, less mildly, with the man in khaki out of sight. There was going to be no money in it, I was positive about that. The whole transaction, it was patent to me, was going to be a sort of exchange between the two. Vasu wanted to win the other's favor through my help.
So far I had done regular printing of stationery for Vasu, and he had shown no signs of paying for the work. I told the man, handing back the manuscript, please go through it again and make all the final revisions and additions, that'll help. And if you are satisfied with the final form, we'll do something with it.
I don't want you to incur any unnecessary expense later. Corrections are rather expensive, you know. All the time you can give for revisions in manuscript will be worthwhile. Quote.
Once again my experience of would-be authors saved me. Authors like to think that they took infinite pains and labor to attain perfection. I could see Vasu's bewilderment. He could not understand whether it was a good thing or a bad thing that had happened. The manuscript had changed hands too swiftly. He looked at my face and then at the others.
I was a seasoned printer. I knew the importance of shuffling off a manuscript without loss of time. Once the manuscript got lodged with you, you lost your freedom, and authority passed on to the writer of the manuscript.
Vasu ventured to say, "How can you make him come again? Do you know where he has to come from?" "From Peak House, where he is camping."
Very encouraging. 60 miles away. It was not often that this man was going to find the time and conveyance to come downhill. He won't have to come.
"You can fetch the manuscript," I said, and Vasu agreed with alacrity. Yes, that's a good idea. I'll always be around you, you know."
A week later, a brown envelope from the forest department arrived for Vasu. His face lit up at the sight of it. Must be my game license.
It was embarrassing to go into the jungle without it. "Now you will see what I do." "The swine!"
he cried when he had read the contents. "They think I want to go sightseeing in the forests, and permit me to shoot duck and deer, as if I cared." He remained in thought for a while.
"Now they will find out what I can do." He carelessly thrust the paper into his pocket.